guys. How are you doing today? One thing that definitely needs to change in the UK is how things operate as far as the Houses of Commons is concerned. You know, the sheer level of contempt that some of these politicians have for insurgent parties is just astounding to me, really. You know, it's one thing to dislike someone, it's one thing to disagree with somebody else, but, you know, in a setting like that where it's supposed to be mature and sensible and diplomatic and respectful, you would think that the people who have been lucky enough to be chosen to represent their constituents would have some humility about that. Sadly, that isn't the case. A lot of these people that get into Parliament, unfortunately, are extremely entitled people, rude, disruptive, just not very pleasant people, unfortunately. And often when they do get into power, they don't fulfill the wishes of their constituents most of the time. In fact, they deliberately try to avoid having to, especially if it goes against their own personal politics. So, you know, we have a system in which we vote in people based on the things that they campaign on. You know, you see them handing out pamphlets, and you know they do their usual, you know, shenanigans of knocking on people's doors and, you know, trying to convince people that they're the right candidate. When in reality, it's just a sham. It's a scam, really. The whole lot of it, the whole democratic system, is a scam, as far as I can see. You vote people in. Well, you go out there and cast a vote somewhere in wherever your local polling station is, whether it's your local election or a general election, and that's as far as it goes. You know, there's no real sense of direct influence over anything, really. It's just like, you know, the only ability you have to make a difference is to put an X on a piece of paper once a year or once every 4 or 5 years. Okay, and well, that makes a big difference, does it? You know, that's somehow empowering people, really. You know, I just watched a clip with the leader of Reform, Nigel Farage. You know, and it doesn't matter whether you like the man or you agree with him. You know, it doesn't. That's kind of besides the point. That's irrelevant, really. But what matters is that people, you know, it was in the House of Commons and it was talking about the ECHR, European Convention on Human Rights Act, and how it's ineffective and how it's, whether it was intentional or not, I don't know, but it was essentially created a lot of serious damage to the UK as far as migration is concerned. You know, sheer amounts of poor quality immigration, and you know, you could just see the sheer arrogance on the people that were sat behind him. Just the sheer smugness, the sheer just utter contempt that they had for him, just simply because he was talking about something that they happen to have a very hard line on, because they're the status quo, or what they think that they are. the Liberal Democrats, they're really delusional. They really believe that they're far more important in the sphere of British political establishment than they really are. They really aren't an entity anymore. They haven't been for a long time, and they won't be for a long time to come. And the reason that they're so bitter and resentful and so spiteful is because they know that Nigel Farage, well, maybe not know, but they certainly have a feeling that he's likely to be the next Prime Minister. Like I said, whether you like the man or not, you can at least say that when other people are talking in the House of Commons, from what I've seen of him anyway, he's usually respectful, doesn't interrupt people. But when he's talking, suddenly everyone's having chit chat all around him and making petty little remarks and insults at him left, right, and centre, especially from those behind him. I think probably some of it's playing to the cameras, probably a little bit because it is recorded. But I think that there's some genuine disdain for him as well. And it just made me really angry actually watching it, because it was just like it's really, it just shows you everything that's wrong with British politics. It shows you the levels of utter hatred that the status quo has for people like Farage or any kind of insurgency party. It's always about what they want, what they think should be allowed to be said. What they think is the standard of morality that everyone should live up to, and what they like and agree with should be the things that are allowed to be talked about and nothing else. It's like, and you could just see it was just the whole thing of like they just think they're untouchable. They think that they're so important, so much more worthy than everybody else, because they take a line on migration or immigration that's deemed to be, that they think anyway, delusionally, they think that most people support, and what people like the Liberal Democrats don't realise yet, as far as I can tell, is that people don't support them anymore. Sure, they have a small following, probably a few million people probably, but the vast majority of the public don't support them. They no longer support the Conservative Party either, and they certainly don't support Labour anymore. And I think they perceive Farage and Reform as a threat. Not in numbers, but because of the popularity that they're very conscious of. In polls, in Reform being very popular in media and across much of the country, and they know that Reform is a serious threat to them and to the status quo and to their ideology. And they want nothing to do with Reform. They certainly want nothing to do with Nigel Farage. And these people are just everything that's wrong with that country. They're everything that's wrong about it. The sheer levels of just delusional entitlement. Sheer levels of self-importance. Delusions of grandeur. They just think they're something that they're not. And if I had my way, I would disband parties like the Liberal Democrats and Labour and the Conservatives. They've proven themselves unworthy. They've proven themselves to be complicit in grooming gang activities up and down the country, indirectly that is. But they certainly turned a blind eye to a lot of it because it was inconvenient. It was an inconvenient reality. And they secretly support the ongoing, that is, illegal mass migration, illegal migration to the country from parts of the Middle East and Africa. And of course they don't want the ECHR to be overturned because deep down they secretly like having cheap labour. Thousands upon thousands of people breaking into the country every year illegally. Because it suits them and their pals. It suits certain business, it suits certain industries and businesses to have, vast amounts of cheap, illegal workers, where they have very little in the way of rights, very little in the way of documentation, so they can get away with things. And and deep down, you can just tell that they hate the British public, the actual indigenous Brits. They despise them with all their heart. What's left of their heart? They didn't have one to begin with, but they genuinely hate the British people. And if that's not something that should keep you up at night, I don't know what it is. That the very people that get voted into power are the same people that will do anything they can to keep systems and structures in place that have no benefit, no advantages for the indigenous population of that country, unless there's some kind of financial incentive behind it. And in fact, most of the time, the things that they get, that they campaign for leading up to the election, a lot of the time they won't prioritise those things at all. Even though there's enough money in the local council authorities to do certain, whatever it is that they've been campaigning over, some project dealing with some antisocial behaviour problems, I don't know, economic issues, unemployment, I don't know, council tax related issues, whatever it is. Most of the time they don't prioritise the things that really need to be done because they don't believe in them, because they'd rather spend money on other things that have no real benefit. And probably I wouldn't be surprised, honestly, if some kind of embezzlement is going on in a lot of councils across the UK. I don't know that for a fact, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's going on. There are certainly there certainly seems to be a lot of corruption going on, mismanagement of money. Just certain parts of the town, city, just kind of being left to rot away, even though they plan to. They have consultations to work on some kind of solution, and nothing ever gets done, nothing ever changes. 5 years, 10 years goes by. The building that was supposed to be, renovated is nothing ever gets done. The land never gets developed. All they do is just have endless consultations. It's all, as far as I can see, democracy means nothing. There's no real value in it. There's no real... there's no real point in it. You might as well just not bother voting. You might as well just close all the polling stations. You might as well just have a dictatorship. You might as well just say, look, fuck it. Let's just do away with voting every few years, because it doesn't fucking result in anything positive for the average person anyway. Nothing ever really comes of it. And the councils can't say, we don't have enough money. You do have enough money, you just don't want to prioritise it on the things that the public want. You want to prioritise the things that you will get some investment from, that you can make some money out of. That's what it is. Even though morally and ethically, the public should be put first, should be prioritised. Their needs, should be at the top of the list, but they very rarely are, because ultimately it's a business. It's about money. It's about making profit. And if it's not about making profit for the council, it's about making profit for the government. I mean, that extends to just business overall, really. Certainly, the bigger the business, the more they've got to lose, So entities like councils, they've got a lot to lose. So, they're very shady organisations, very, very shady. And, as far as I'm concerned, I don't think... I've just lost all hope in politicians. I've lost all hope in politics, if I'm honest about it. I don't think, in the UK's case, I don't think there is a way out of it, democratically speaking. I don't think that maybe reform might be the answer, but my gut instinct tells me that they will crack under pressure. And when that happens, maybe that will be the final straw. Maybe that's the point when all shit will hit the fan. Once people realise that reform is either a con job or they're sold out, and they just faced so much opposition, so much pressure that they couldn't do what they wanted to do, then I think at that point you'll start to see real unrest. I've never seen the sheer level of disrespectfulness. I don't think I've ever quite seen it like it is. The complete lack of values these days, the complete lack of self-control. It's off the charts. It's like one time people could listen to one another without butting in, without being interrupted, without being sarcastic and rude, and sitting there and being all making snide remarks and being sniggering away, and and little petty passive aggressive jabs, etc. Like I said, it's not even about Nigel Farage. It's not about one particular politician. It's about the absolute rot at the core of the system, and probably the core of society, that seems, as far as I've been able to understand it, we've lost our ways. We've lost our standards. There's no real sense of personal standards of or etiquette in debating or in political discourse anymore. It's always about division. It's always about this side or that side. It's always about, well, if you have this idea, if you say this or that, then you're the enemy. You're either, as Bush once said, you're either George Bush, during the I think was it 3 or something, 2002 or 3, rather, with us or against us. It's that kind of attitude, really. It's that very black or white type of thing. It's like there doesn't seem to be any real nuance in political discussions either. It's very black and white. It's very I'm right, you're wrong, because you have this opinion, or you express it using this terminology or this language. And so there's just this endless policing going on, and it's because of people like those that sat behind Nigel Farage that we ended up with a woke a very bent, skewed system of morality, that was labelled woke. It was labelled wokeism, woke politics. I watched it and I just was just astounded, really, to be honest. Just astounded by the sheer level of just the attitude of these people, the pettiness, the childishness of these people, the sheer lack of maturity. And when you have a system that's dominated predominantly by those types of people, whether it's with the Liberal Democrats, whether it's with the Conservatives, whether it's with Labour, whether it's with the Green Party, they're all the same. They're all these very pompous middle-class types that have never done a hard day's work in their entire life and never will. And they live in nice areas in which the things that they support, because they think it's our moral duty to support these ideas, they will never have any consequences on their lives. Well, at least probably. There's certainly a higher chance that they won't, certainly compared to the average person in more working class areas, where a lot of the people that get shipped out from these places of multiple occupancy, or these migrant-dominated institutions, or ex-RAF bases, or hotels, or whatever. His Majesty's at His Majesty's service, at His Majesty's pleasure, stamped all over them. It's just a real. When you see things like that, you just think, where's the hope? Where's the optimism? Where's the positivity? Where's the unity here? Where's the let's come together and find solutions to this? See, that's what British politics is. There's no sense of unity or anything, really. It's always, that's why you've got so many political parties. It's like nobody can come together and agree on real important principles and values and key policy ideas. It shouldn't be like that. I don't think that's how politics should work. I think it should be that politics should be about compromise. It should be about people coming together and putting their differences aside, mainly their egos, and try to work out policies and legislation that benefits the people that these people in the House of Commons are supposed to represent. They're voted in as representatives of their constituency. That's what an MP is. That's what their job is. They are supposed to be a representation of the people of their area that vote that they got enough votes that they won that seat. So there's something extremely corroded in the system. It doesn't work. Not only because you don't have any real say in what these people do, you have no control, say, in key policies, in the way that the law works. And so we talk about democracy as if we're somehow, in charge of all of this. And we have no real charge, no real sense of real responsibility over anything. We don't have any real empowerment as far as things that affect our own lives at all. It's just really fucking infuriating. And what can you do about it? You know, that's the thing. What can you actually do? Keep voting for the next thing that comes along and the next one until they inevitably disappoint you, because it's always a trade-off. Everything's always, it's always competition. It's always about survival. Even in that environment, it's just always ego bashing all the time. It's always tit for tat, point scoring. How are you supposed to have hope in a system like that? Well, all you see is just people that care more about their own image and status and their job and their salary more than doing the right thing, or trying to at least. Sure, they're doing the right thing for their council. I'm sure they are. But most of the time, they're not doing the right things for the people that part of that area that council is supposed to support and help. In fact, as time's going on, people are paying more and more and more for very little in return. I don't know. Maybe I think I've just lost hope in that. Maybe I've just become too apathetic to all this stuff. I don't know, but I mean, if you can't, you know, if you can't get the backing of the House for key policy decisions that affect the average person, then there's no way, is there? So reform will inevitably end up facing so much opposition, so many barriers, that they'll be lucky if they cannot. They'll be lucky even if they get into power. I won't be surprised if the election is rigged somehow from 2029 or whenever it is, whether it's brought forward for some reason, I don't know. And even if they did get into power, they'll face so many hurdles. And they certainly won't be able to deliver on everything that they want to. They just won't be able to do it. It'll just be the backers, the stakeholders, the banks, the real powers behind the government. We now make the decisions, don't we? If there's no money, if there's no incentive to do anything financially, they won't allow it. Or they'll certainly put up a real serious fight. See, all of these things are problems: multiculturalism, excessive immigration, mass migration, legal and illegal, the issues of various legislation attached to the European Union, the fact that we're joined up to the Human Rights Act and the ECHR, etc., etc. These are going to be probably a decade, at the very least, probably a good 5 to 10 years. My guess is that reform, if they do win in 2029, that they will face a real struggle to get anything through, and the media will be out in a frenzy to try and dig up as much dirt as they possibly can on him or other members of reform, to try and bring doubt over the whole thing, and to instill distrust and fear and shaming. It's just, politics is nothing but a shit show, a shit throwing competition, really. Let's see what sticks. Let's see how much of it sticks. And then politicians wonder why people suddenly stop voting, while there's, say, 20 to 30% of the population that doesn't vote. That's why, because they've lost all faith in the system. A system, the very same system that allowed grooming gangs to go on for 30 years. The very same system that's allowing people to come across the English Channel every single day. And who have the means to stop it but don't. Because there's no incentive to stop it. Because it's a business. The same people that know that not all, but some of the people that are coming across in these boats, terrorists, or would-be terrorists, or future terrorists, future criminals, and rather negligent, incompetent, or just downright evil and don't care. They couldn't give a fuck about the consequences of their actions because it won't affect them. Well, probably not anyway. Maybe we just need to scrap democracy. Maybe we just need to have a complete reset of the entire fucking thing that we call society. Maybe we've reached that point. Maybe we just, nothing works anymore. There's no effectiveness to anything anymore. Everything's riddled with such degrees of corruption that no amount of doing the right thing will matter. Doing the legal thing will matter. Because you're dealing with psychopaths. You're dealing with people who see people's money. They're opportunists. These are people who see you as an asset rather than a living, sentient thing. You're a commodity. You're something to be used. You're something to be manipulated for the benefit of your own agenda. I feel sorry for Nigel Farage, actually. I can't say that I'm a fan of his, if I'm honest. There are certain things I don't like about him, but I do feel sorry for him in the House of Commons because he's up against so much backlash, so much distasteful rhetoric. Just depths of head-like mentality, political mob-like mentality. I feel sorry for him. I really do. You can, you can say what you want about the man, but but at least he usually has care to see for other people, which is more than can be said for a lot of those people sitting immediately behind him and in front of him. And if that doesn't show you just how bad things are in the UK, or certainly in England, then I don't know what does. Where you don't let a man that's been democratically elected say what he's been allowed to legally say and talk about, and has been allotted a specific time and day to talk about that particular topic. Doesn't matter. You can disagree with somebody all you want. You don't have to like the man, but you have to respect that he's been democratically elected into that role, and it has a right to be there. just as much as everybody else. Just because you don't like someone doesn't give you the right to talk all over them, or to ridicule or mock them, or to talk shit about them in front of everybody else in the building, and millions of people across the world as well. And the thing is, it's like they forget that the microphones are on. You know, I don't know whether maybe they just don't care. You know, just the. I just found it really sickening. Actually, it was really sickening. It was really disturbing. It was. I watched it twice, and I was just like, "Is this really where we're at in 2025? Is this how far we've come politically? Is this what we are as a nation now? A nation of rude, smug, fucking shitbags that feel the need to interrupt and argue and be dishonourable in a political space that's been designated for political ideas, and even, you know, whether you agree with them or not. So for it to become an arena, a slagging off match, essentially. What does that say about where we are? You know? What does that say about the lack of values these days? What does that tell us about the piss poor quality of discourse that we've found ourselves in? Where the fuck are we now? Where are we as a society? How did we get here? How did we end up in this place? You know, of course, people have always had disagreements. People have always fought fiercely over, you know, debated fiercely over things, and that's fine. That's okay. But to it's just the impolite nature of people. It's the insulting. It's the inconsideration. It's the digs. You know, it's the interruptive. You know, just behaviours. It's fucking disgraceful. It's disgusting. And it needs to change. You know, is there any wonder why there's stagnation politically? That's why. Those are the people holding things back. Those are the people deliberately preventing any kind of real progress. Progress that would help the average person. Progress that doesn't benefit them. Which is why they don't want it. Because that would mean to abandon their principles, abandon their values of morality. These people have no sense of shame, they have no sense of embarrassment, they have no sense of guilt, they have no sense of respect, they have no sense of self-respect. And I hope every single last one of those fucking dirty bastards, for that is exactly what they are, lose their seats in the very near future. Because that's exactly what they will deserve.